Morning. Welcome to Carol's Books and Storytime. I'm feeling rather sad this morning, and the reason is that in this country we have been commemorating the end of the First World War, when many of our young people lost their lives on the battlefields of France and Belgium. And two of my grandfathers were involved in that First World War. They never spoke about their experiences, and most people never spoke about their experiences. And then I watched the film last night, of the recreated film from old footage about the war, and it struck me then how futile it was and what hell those soldiers had to go through. Now, out of that conflict, we got poetry. Now, poets write from the heart, and the war poets certainly wrote from the heart. Their work is absolutely amazing. And Wilfred Owen was one of those poets. And if you remember, if you were watching the television last night, you saw a sand picture of Wilfred Owen at Folkestone, where he left to go on to France in order to become a soldier. Now, Wilfred Owen wrote his poem Exposure in 1917 to 18, and he wrote it from the trenches of World War I, and long before he was killed in battle. Now, most of Owen's poetry reveals his anger at the war's waste of life and its horrific conditions. Now, the soldiers in the trenches of World War I were kept awake at night, and they were afraid of enemy attack. However, nature seems to have been their main enemy. It was freezing cold, it was windy, and it was snowing. The men imagined returning home, but the doors there are closed to them. They believe that sacrificing themselves in the war is the only way of keeping their loved ones at home safe. They return to thinking about their deaths in the icy, bleak trenches, and this is what he tells us in his poem, which is called Exposure. Very interesting poem. Some of my students are studying it for GCSE. Our brains ache in the merciless iced east winds that knife us. Wearied, we keep awake because the night is silent. Low dropping flares confuse our memory of the salient. Worried by silence, sentries whisper, curious, nervous, but nothing happens. Watching, we hear the mad gusts tugging on the wire, like twitching agonies of men amongst its brambles. Northward, incessantly, the flickering gunnery rumbles, far off, like a dull rumour of some other war. What are we doing here? The poignant misery of dawn begins to grow. We only know war lasts, rain soaks, and clouds sag stormy. Dawn missing in the east, a melancholy army. Attacks once more in ranks on shivering ranks of grey, but nothing happens. Sudden successive flights of bullets streak the silence, less deathly than the air that shudders black with snow, with sidelong flowing flakes that flock, pause and renew. We watch them wandering up and down the wind's nonchalance, but nothing happens. Pale flakes with fingering stealth come feeling for our faces. We cringe in holes, back on forgotten dreams, and stare snow-dazed deep into grassier ditches. So we drowse, sun-dozed, littered with blossoms trickling where the blackbird fusses. Is it that we're dying? Slowly our ghosts drag home, glimpsing the sunk fires, glazed with crusted dark red jewels. Crickets jingle there. For hours the innocent mice rejoice. The house is theirs. shutters and doors all closed. On us, the doors are closed. We turn back to our dying. Since we believe not otherwise can kind fires burn, nor ever suns smile true on child or field or fruit. For God's invincible spring our love is made afraid, therefore not loath. We lie out here, therefore we're born, for love of God seems dying. Tonight this frost will fasten on this mud and us, shrivelling many hands, plucking foreheads crisp. The burying party picks and shovels in shaking grasp, pours over half-known faces. All their eyes are ice, but nothing happens. I think that's extremely poignant poem about what life was like in the trenches, the suffering, the physical pain, even thinking that they were not welcome at home. That was deep mental anguish, the boredom, nothing's happening, the hopelessness, they're helpless against the forces of nature. And the poem offers them very little help of the future. So I think that is just an amazing poem. And do you know what? We just haven't learnt the lessons, have we, from the First World War? We just haven't learnt the lessons. My old history teacher, Mr. Spalding, used to say that man never learns his lessons, that there are always wars, because man can't keep to a peace. And he was right. He was right. So we've got conflicts in this world today, terrible conflicts, and who are suffering? It's the kids that are suffering. It's the women that are suffering. Yeah, the soldiers are suffering on the front line, but who created this nonsense in the first place? Who is it who actually goes to war? I know women go to war these days as well, but who is it who actually causes these conflicts? Do you know what? I think it's greed. Bye.